So in a previous video, which I will leave linked in the eye above, I went through the players that Manchester United could sign on a free in the summer with their contracts expiring at the end of the season. However, in this video, I'm going to be looking at the players whose contracts expire in the summer of 2026, meaning that United could potentially sign them for a reduced fee in the summer, because obviously they would only have 1 year left on their contracts, or on a free potentially in the summer of 2026. So if we look at the top of the list, we've obviously got the Barcelona players, and whilst you would expect Lamine Yamal, Pedri and Gavi, and even maybe Ronald Araujo to all extend their contracts with Barcelona, the issue Barcelona have is they're struggling to even register players that they already have signed, like Dani Olmo. So when it comes to extending these players' contracts, particularly someone like Yamal, who should be on massive money, and would be on massive money at another club, I can actually see a situation where maybe Barcelona struggle to get Yamal on a new contract and get him registered, particularly if him or his agent want to get him on a contract with the money that he probably deserves. Now, Manchester United at the moment are clearly out of the race for Yamal, but come the summer of 2026, I think pretty much every top club in Europe should be keeping an eye out on Barcelona's contract situations, because we've seen with Dani Olmo, they're a complete mess. And so it wouldn't shock me if we see players like Pedri, Gavi, Lamine Yamal, Ronald Araujo leaving on a free in 2026 just because of Barcelona's incompetence. But at the moment, United can't even think about Lamine Yamal, neither can they really think about Jamal Musiala, which is actually a shame, because if we had sacked Ten Hag in the summer, got Ruben Amorim, and actually had a competent season where we finish in the Champions League, you'd imagine Manchester United, along with probably Liverpool, Arsenal and Chelsea, would be the front runners for Musiala, just because Barcelona at the moment, they can't even sign Dani Olmo, and he was a Barcelona player. So even though when you look at Musiala, you do think Barcelona would be the perfect place, I don't even know if it's feasible at this point. But this could also spell problems for Bayern Munich, because if Musiala decides he's going to run down his contract to get a big signing on fee in 2026 when he moves clubs, Bayern are going to be forced to sell him this summer. And realistically, clubs are going to look at the situation and think, why would we drop 80-90 million pounds on Jamal Musiala this summer when we could just get him on a free next summer? And so I think Bayern Munich, like Barcelona, are in a precarious position. But given where Manchester United currently are, Musiala in the summer is a no-go. However, if we keep tabs on him, maybe come 2026, if we are back in the Champions League and we actually look half decent, that could be a possibility, but I wouldn't put any money on it. However, you've got someone like Achraf Hakimi, his contract at PSG expires in 2026, he's 26 years old now, and he would actually be probably the perfect right wing back for Amorim's system, especially if you had Ahmad sitting ahead in that right interior forward role. I mean, Hakimi's not a natural winger, he's not like a 1v1 specialist, but he's so good when it comes to his ball carrying and his forward running, as well as his end product in the final third, that I think if United can, or they have any chance of getting him, they have to try and make that deal happen. I mean, a right side of Mazraoui as a right-sided centre-back, Hakimi at right wing-back and Ahmad ahead in that interior forward role, looks actually like a title-winning right side, and Hakimi is a fantastic fullback. We saw how he got the best out of Sancho at Borussia Dortmund, and so for that wing-back role, for me it's between Hakimi or Frimpong, and I'd probably prefer Hakimi. So if United could put in a bid this summer of between 30, maybe 35 million pounds, even if it's not viable, I mean, if Hakimi ain't going to extend his contract at PSG, they'd probably want to sell him this summer. And Hakimi, like Mazraoui, is also Moroccan, so maybe there's some link there. I mean, it's an outside shout, but Hakimi for me would be the perfect right wing back for Amorim's system. And also when you look on this list, we've got another fullback from PSG, Nuno Mendes, who we've actually been strongly linked with. And Hakimi and Mendes as the wing-backs in Amorim's system is probably as good as you can get, especially if you had a winger like Ahmad who could also play at right wing-back, maybe move Hakimi to right-sided centre-back when we are really pushing for a goal. That gives Amorim some fantastic options. And to be honest, Mendes and Hakimi, if we could get him in the summer for maybe 60 to 70 million pounds combined, I think that's a fantastic deal and would radically change our ability to attack down the flanks, because both Mendes and Hakimi have that athleticism and the ball carrying ability, as well as the running in behind and even the end product in the final third, to significantly improve United from wide situations. Now, I will do a more in-depth video on Nuno Mendes because we've obviously been linked with him quite frequently throughout the last few weeks. But in this video, because there's so many options to cover, I'm just going to go over each player briefly. But before I carry on going down the list, a quick reminder, I do have an in-game Instagram group chat where we do have analysis and discussion during the Manchester United games, as well as Q&As at the start and at the end of the week. So I'll leave that linked in all the usual places, and anyone signing up, it would be massively appreciated. So carrying on down the list, we've got two players who I've spoken about in recent months, Theo Hernandez and Ademola Lookman. Now, Theo Hernandez, this season I have been kind of disappointed with him. I mean, he has had a few problems at AC Milan. I do still think his ability's there. And to be honest, it's a toss-up between him and Nuno Mendes for me. I think Teo is better offensively, having that piece of magic, whether it's a long shot, a complete drive through the centre of the pitch, carrying the ball from the defensive to the final third. But I'd say Mendes is probably more consistent in terms of his overlapping. Defensively, Mendes is definitely the better fullback. I mean, a wing-back could help Teo because he's obviously got more defensive security around him, but positionally, Teo can get caught out every now and then. It would be something I'd be willing to overlook because I think that wing-back, it would get the best out of him, and you do kind of want a winger in that role. And when it comes down to offensive output, Teo is more winger-like than Nuno Mendes. But Nuno Mendes in the final third is still very good. I mean, he does rely a bit more on interplay rather than Teo, who can just drive through on his own. But if Mendes is playing 1-2s on that side, he definitely has the ability to get in behind his fullback and be dangerous from crossing situations. And if you look at Mendes' FBref report, which of course is a bit skewed because he's playing in Ligue 1 with PSG, who are highly possession dominant, you can see how good he is when it comes to his progressive passing and his carrying. But it probably would depend on who else we sign as a left wing back as a replacement for Shaw and Malacia. If we were re-signing Alvaro Fernandez, I'd probably lean towards Teo just because I'd want a more offensive option, as I do think stylistically Alvaro Fernandez and Nuno Mendes are a lot more similar than Teo Hernandez. However, if we had a natural winger, for example someone like Samuel Lino at Atletico Madrid, or ideally someone like Bino Gittins or Nico Williams, then I'd probably want Nuno Mendes just because it balances it out, and Nuno Mendes is a better defensive left wing back than either of those two winger-like options, and definitely better than Teo. And so for me, it's hard to really say who I prefer out of Nuno Mendes and Teo, just because I don't know who else we're going to be signing or what our other left wing back options are going to be. But Nuno Mendes does have the advantage that he's 5 years younger than Teo, and I think he's also worked with Amorim as well at Sporting. I'm pretty sure there was a crossover there. And so at the moment, I'd probably go with Nuno Mendes, just because I think him and Teo are probably going to cost the same amount. And ideally, I would look to bring in Ademola Lookman, because I think he can play in that interior left forward position, but also could play as a more offensive left wing back. And I think if you have Lookman, you probably want Nuno Mendes over Teo. And so for the sake of that, I'm going to go with Nuno Mendes over Teo. Also looking to bring in Ademola Lookman. Hopefully we could get Lookman and Nuno Mendes for around £70 million combined. Add in Hakimi, maybe just over 100 million. I think that would massively improve us. Hakimi on one side, Nuno Mendes on the other, and then you've got Lookman, who could play as a left wing back if necessary, but also play in that interior left forward position as well. Now, there are actually so many players who you could actually consider as potential options for United that I may have to do a separate video. You've got players like Frankie de Jong. Personally, I think that time has gone. I think in a double pivot, I don't think he's got the athleticism and the tenacity to really function. I mean, he'd definitely do a good job for Amorim, and he'd certainly improve us in the build-up phase, but I'd prefer someone like Tijani Reinders, just because I think he's got that added athleticism from a defensive point of view. And also, De Jong's going to be on massive wages as well. And so I'm actually struggling to see where De Jong would go. He'd have to lower his wage demands massively. But for me, De Jong to Manchester United is just one of those that's going to be a non-starter. He probably should have gone to Manchester United back in 2022 instead of Casemiro. It didn't happen, and for me it's just one I wouldn't consider. You've also got Rayan Aït-Nouri at Wolves, who I definitely would consider on my shortlist of potential left wing backs, but considering you've got Nuno Mendes and Teo Hernandez there, he'd be further down on that list than those two. Quinton Timber and Edon Zagrova are definitely two players I would be looking at. I suggested Zagrova, I think it was last season, and I still think he's one of the most underrated players in Europe, particularly if you want a left-footed right winger. He'd be a massive improvement on Antony. The only issue I would have is from a squad building perspective. You've already got Ahmad, who's a left-footed right winger who can play at right wing back. If United are signing another right wing back or a winger, I think it does have to be someone who can either play on the left as well, someone like Bino Gittins, or someone like Jeremy Frimpong, who's going to be right-footed and be able to burst down the outside and also play behind Ahmad. I don't think Zagrova and Ahmad on the same side works very well because they both want to cut inside onto their left foot. And so Zagrova isn't going to be providing those overlaps that I think will get the best out of Ahmad. He's instead going to be wanting to cut into the same areas where Ahmad's going to want to pick up. Quinton Timber actually could be a great option for squad depth. I mean, he's got the athleticism, the ball carrying ability. He's very good technically, especially when it comes to being able to swivel out of pressure and drive through the pitch. He's stylistically very similar to Tijani Reinders. So if we couldn't get Reinders, Timber would definitely be someone I'm looking at. And even if we signed him in the summer or maybe in 2026 on a free, having him as a backup option to Reinders could actually work very well. So Timber is definitely someone I would be considering. So thank you for watching. If you want to check out the Patreon and the Instagram group chat, I'll leave that linked in all the usual places.